Empty nose syndrome, a condition so devastating, so destabilizing, that many patients describe it as the destruction of their ability to exist inside their own body. And yet, despite overwhelming testimony from thousands of sufferers, ENS remains one of the most denied and dismissed conditions in modern medicine. Why? Why do so many doctors reject a condition that steals sleep, destroys breathing, dysregulates the nervous system, and pushes some patients into unbearable suffering? Why are patients who underwent surgeries marketed as safe waking up to a nightmare that the medical system refuses to acknowledge? The truth is uncomfortable. The truth is deeply human. And the truth is this: empty nose syndrome is not ignored by accident. It is ignored because accepting it would force a confrontation with surgical harm on a scale the ENT profession is not psychologically, economically, or institutionally prepared to face. Admitting ENS means acknowledging that surgeons have removed vital anatomical structures without fully understanding their functions. It means acknowledging that training was incomplete, that physiology, neurobiology, mechanoreception, CO2 regulation, mucosal integrity, and nasal airflow resistance were never taught in depth. It means admitting that a procedure sold as harmless has caused lifelong disability, panic, hypoventilation, hyperventilation cycles, chronic sympathetic overdrive, broken sleep mechanisms, and, in the worst cases, suicide. And when professionals profit from a procedure, when their reputation and identity are built on it, when hospitals generate income from it, and when complication rates determine liability, denial becomes the most convenient defense mechanism. Human psychology chooses self-protection over empathy. It is always easier to say, "The patient is anxious," than "We permanently damaged their breathing system." Across ENS communities, thousands of people describe losing the ability to sleep, the ability to regulate breathing, the ability to stay calm, the ability to function. And tragically, some lose the ability to continue living. In just 2 ENS support groups with around 5,000 to 7,000 combined members, 8 individuals died by suicide in 2024. Their deaths are documented by friends, family, and fellow sufferers. The stories, memorials, and personal accounts are publicly available, and anyone listening can search for Empty Nose Syndrome, Self-Destruction Memorial to read these accounts themselves. This site documents the suicides, the patient stories, and the reality that the medical system refuses to acknowledge. It shows the human cost of denial, the suffering of those whose lives were destroyed after trusting a procedure that promised relief. And yet, the medical system continues to say, ENS does not exist, or the symptoms are psychological. This is not science. This is self-preservation. It is cognitive dissonance in its purest form. I did this surgery. I believe I am a good doctor. Therefore, this complication must not be real. But the human consequences are very real. ENS patients experience a minute ventilation collapse, too little CO2, alkalosis, chronic air hunger, sympathetic overload. They cannot sleep because the neural receptors that guide the breathing-sleep interface are gone or silenced. Their nose becomes a tunnel of dry, burning air that triggers constant stress signals. These reactions are not psychological. They are physiological, mechanical, and neurological. Why doesn't the system intervene? Because to intervene, regulators and medical authorities would have to admit that thousands of unnecessary surgeries were performed without informed consent, without proper warnings, and without full understanding. It would reveal that a surgical field carried on with inadequate training for decades. It would expose liability, It would force a rewrite of textbooks, guidelines, and reimbursement structures. It would open the door to lawsuits globally, so they protect the system instead of the patient. Many doctors simply cannot empathize with ENS because they cannot imagine a nose could have such catastrophic effects. They have never experienced loss of airflow sensation, loss of resistance, the suffocating paradox of an open nose that feels closed, the constant respiratory instability, or the way chronic hyperventilation gradually destroys the mind. Without this lived experience, and without proper education, they default to minimizing the patient's suffering. Not out of cruelty, but out of narrowness. But narrowness becomes cruelty when it prevents recognition of harm. ENS remains unacknowledged because it asks too much of the people responsible. It demands humility. It demands admitting mistakes. It demands confronting the limitations of surgical training and the dangers of unnecessary turbinate reductions performed for profit, convenience, or simple lack of understanding. So instead, patients are left to navigate a nightmare alone, one that has already cost lives. And unless regulators, researchers, and ENT leadership finally step forward, unless they listen to the testimonies, unless they read the memorials, unless they choose courage over comfort, history will record that an entire medical field looked away while patients suffered in silence. ENS is not rare. It is simply unrecognized. And the suffering is not psychological. It is engineered. To anyone living with ENS, you are not imagining your symptoms. You are not anxious. You are experiencing a real condition that modern medicine is decades behind in understanding. You deserve validation. You deserve compassion. You deserve treatment. And you deserve a medical system that has the courage to face the consequences of its own actions. The silence will not last forever. The more voices speak out, the harder it becomes for the system to hide. And the truth, your truth, will eventually be impossible to ignore.